Hello, you are listening to The Wellness Project. I'm your host, Des, and this is episode number 133. I would greatly appreciate it before we get started if you can head over to iTunes and Spotify and leave me a review. It helps the podcast to grow, which in turn will help people with their mental health. On today's podcast episode, I am speaking with Patricia Morgan. Patricia is a therapist, an author, and professional speaker about the topic of resiliency. Today, Patricia is going to be speaking to me about what resiliency is, what factors impact our level of resiliency, and how we can increase our resiliency skills. This is a much needed and very important conversation. I'm looking forward to you hearing it, so help me welcome Patricia. Hi, Patricia. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. So today we're talking all about resiliency, so I'm really looking forward to that. So to get us started, I'd love if you can introduce yourself, tell us who you are, how you got to where you are today, just share your story with us.
Well, my resiliency journey started when my husband and I decided to adopt a little girl. We already had a 3-year-old son. I was an early childhood educator. We adopted a 6-year-old. We were her 5th family. And when my behaviors started to erupt from my own past childhood abuse, I ended up in therapy. And during that journey, discovered an awful lot about stress, resiliency, trauma, recovery. And this day, that daughter is now 54 years of age, and she has 3 children. And we have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder involved in that journey, meaning before we understood anything about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, people were left in the dark raising children. So we had a lot of parent blame along our journey. But fortunately, she now has a diagnosis, and that helps us. And my husband and I, even though we're spunky seniors, we still are caregivers of a 54-year-old, not physically, but she certainly needs help with any abstract concepts, such as managing money, managing time, so I make all appointments, etc. But along the way, doubting myself and beating myself up for not being the mother that I wanted to be, came a healing journey. So at this point, I am a therapist, an author, and I do some professional speaking about resiliency. I've written a number of books. Probably the most directly one about resilience is From Woe to Wow: How Resilient Women Succeed at Work. And that was mentored by a researcher in resiliency, Dr. Al Siebert. I saw him years ago being interviewed by Oprah, and I called him at Seattle University, and he offered to mentor me. And it was a beautiful, beautiful relationship we had until he died about 5 years ago.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing all that. That's amazing that you just called him up and he started mentoring you. Wow, that's really amazing.
Well, one of the resiliency tools is asking for what you want, and you get an answer of either yes or no. He ended up helping me write my first book, and then he also provided the forward for it and was a big support to me in my work. We all need to have mentors. The research that came out fairly recently in our history in 2019, Juliana Holt-Lunstad came out with her 10-year study on loneliness and helped us understand that we really function much, much better when we have a community of support, and mentors or mentorship is a key role. Having confidants, people you feel comfortable sharing your feelings, your emotions, your secrets with, are important. A sense of family is important, whether that's biological or whether that's a heart connection, people you feel comfortable breaking bread with. And the third area of support that we all need is to have a sense of community where we have an opportunity to give back and make a meaningful difference.
Oh, I fully agree with all of that. All of that is so
Mhm.
important. It's so important for our overall well being, our mental health, our physical health. How do you think that stress and overwhelm and emotional distress impact someone's mental and physical health?
Well, we have a body that has a muscular system, a nervous system. Part of the nervous system, of course, is the brain, and we can only handle so much of our amygdala firing, our alarm system firing that says too much, too much, too much is going on, and get ourselves back to center. So I kind of sometimes think about stress, distress. Trauma is different. If you want to know the difference between distress and trauma, that's always useful to know. Distress, stress is like a drip, 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 drip of toxins. It's dripping on us, it's weighing us down. And we can come home and relax, let it fall off, go down the drain regularly. We maintain our mental and physical health. But if it becomes overwhelming, then the whole system can't handle it. I often describe resiliency through a rubber band, and you pick up a rubber band and it can stretch so far. We need to have stress. We need to have some challenge. Otherwise, our life can become meaningless. If you take a rubber band, it doesn't serve any purpose until you start to stretch it. But if you stretch it too far, what happens, Des?
Snaps.
Snaps, cracks, or breaks. Yeah. So unlike a rubber band, which we throw in the garbage can because it's useless, we human beings have one another. We can raise our hand and say, help. I need some time to rest, to rejuvenate, to get myself back on track.
Oh, great. I really love that analogy with the rubber band. That makes a lot of sense and that helps people to
Mhm.
visualize really what's going on with us. And yeah, if you could share the difference between emotional distress and trauma, I think that would be great.
All right. So Dr. Stephen Porges has just broken open the whole stress management field with his polyvagal theory and an understanding about trauma. And of course, there's other people in the trauma field that are helping us understand trauma. Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry in 2021 released their book called What Happened to You. Stress is a regular, daily, almost daily, depending on whether you're on holiday or not, occurrence. You know, we often go on holidays so that we can have a full week of no pressure, no stress put upon us, right? We're looked after. But then trauma is an event that happened that was very stressful, very disturbing. And it can be all the way from going to war to having an adult yell at a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, you're stupid and won't be anything. And what happens is that that stressful moment is not processed or brought to resolve, that another adult didn't come along and say to the offending adult, that's not okay, that's not the truth, little Des, it's just not true, and take you into your arms and brush it off, and you can get on with your life. So there's a lot of childhood trauma, generational trauma. Of course, people that go into warfare, there's explosive events that happen. And years ago, when my father went to the Second World War, we did not understand post traumatic stress disorder. So what happens is the distress gets blocked, locked into the memory system, into the nervous system, into the muscular system. So people are pulled back. Indicators of living with trauma are unexplained emotions, unexplained behaviors, unexplained illness. All of a sudden, you're feeling something, and it might get triggered by a smell. Well, I could give you an example of one of my childhood traumas. I have two ones that I worked on in therapy. One was when I was a kid, a nurse couldn't find a vein in my arm, and she kept poking and poking and went through 2 arms, not finding the vein. And I woke up at home And only as an adult did I discover it's very difficult to find veins to take blood samples from my arms. But after that happened, and I was about 10 or 11 years old, whenever I saw a needle, I would faint. So I was living with trauma because that whole incident with the needle wasn't resolved. And then I had what's called complex trauma, which is ongoing, either neglect or any kind of abuse, verbal, emotional, physical, sexual, that does not get addressed. And so my dad used to call me stupid. You stupid female, a very troubled man. And so I failed grade 7. I dropped out of high school. And I'll never forget my first job as a family therapist years later, after therapy, after going back to school. Very scared to start my first university class at the age of 30. And I was working at a family counseling agency, and my manager gave me a report and he said, Patricia, there's 2 errors in here I'd like you to correct. And I got triggered. All I heard was, you're stupid. So that's a signal of trauma. Where stress, often people are living with stressful workplaces where there's a lot of pressure on them. And if they left the workplace, all would be well. So that's the difference.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And thank you for those examples. Sadly, I think a lot of people can relate to that. So I'm glad that you were able to share that.
Right.
And
Let me just give one other quick example that most people relate to. Most people have been in some kind of minor or major car accident. And I've helped 3 people that were in car accidents that 10 years later still wouldn't get into a car. But many other people are in a car accident, and a week later the car is repaired and they've maybe had 1 or 2 nightmares about the car accident, but they're back driving. So it makes a difference if you come home to say somebody like my husband, who said, are you all right, dear? And I just had a good cry, and he held me and said, we can replace the car, but we can't replace you. And somebody else that's in a car accident and gets shamed. I had a 16-year-old who at the age of 20 still was terrified to get in a car. That's a really good example that people will relate to.
yeah, that's a great example. Sadly, a lot of people can relate to that. So, as for emotional distress, what are some common symptoms you see people experiencing?
Well, the classic is anxiety and depression and anger management. Those are the 3 that are being tossed around a lot now in our culture, and they are result of too much stress or living with trauma. Depression is that lonely, give up, depressed, little energy, depleted, can hardly move state, and the highly charged state where the nervous system is highly fleeing, fighting, defending state is the anger, the arguing, the fighting to be right. Those are the emotions when they're highly charged or highly depleted, get us into mental and physical challenges as well as relationship challenges. Now, don't get me wrong, we need to embrace and use our emotions as leads for us to live the life that is authentic and full. We need to listen to our emotions. We need to listen to the sadness of a friend forever letting us down, and maybe it's time to let go. But we need to feel angry about the injustices that go on in our world. Get some angry, a little bit of energy and spark there to sign a petition or run for government. Though all of those emotions lead us when they're contained. It's called emotional regulation. Over and over again, we'll have clients come and they'll say, I want to get rid of this feeling. And it's not really helpful. What we want to do is, what's that feeling trying to tell you about what direction to go in, what to let go of, or what to go towards, what to go from or towards, basically. Yeah.
What factors do you believe impact our level of resiliency? Because everyone has a different level. Is there anything that you think contributes to that?
Sometimes I'm asked if we're born resilient or whether we have to work on building resilience. And I like to use the analogy of an egg. So if you've got a grass-fed chicken that has a very strong yolk, and if you've got a chicken that's kept in a factory, the yolk of that chicken is quite weak. I believe that we are born with a certain biology, and some of that biology, genetics, is stronger than somebody else's. But what we do to that egg, whether we scramble it, fry it, feed it, coddle it, changes the constitution of the egg. And so there are children now that are being overindulged, coddled. I don't think that's a good thing. We hopefully have less children being beaten, but that's still happening. So what happens to us does affect who we are. So, the chicken and egg question contributes to that. Then there are what we call risk factors and protective factors. Amy Warner started doing her resiliency research in the 1950s in Hawaii. It was a very thorough study on the children that had high risk factors but still showed resiliency. And more recent study comes from Big Sisters, Big Brothers in the United States on the difference that a big brother or big sister can do around resiliency. And so there's a list of risk factors such as poverty, such as abuse, such as neglect, even neighborhoods and the schools the children go to. All of it makes a difference. The food you're eating, so it all stacks up. Are they risk factors that are diminishing a person's potential, or are they nourishing a person's potential? And on the protective factors is having caring, healthy adults involved, living in certain neighborhoods where there's parks, where there's schools that have quality teachers, opportunities. Poverty is a factor, or whether you've got opportunities. So there are many differences. Now, the wonderful thing is once we turn to become an adult, we do have many more choices available to us. But our wiring and our training often, well, it does follow us through our lifetime. But if we're fortunate, we reach out for help to mitigate the risk factors that perhaps we grew up with. So the whole field of resiliency really comes from positive psychology. It's under the umbrella of positive psychology, and it's sort of a mixture of, do you have good stress management skills? Have you done healing from any trauma you may have? Do you have stress management skills? And do you have good communication skills and good social IQ? So, social IQ and emotional IQ factor in there.
Oh, great. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Are you able to share any stress reduction strategies?
All the breath comes to mind right away. I used to get triggered by my daughter at one time, and doing anything to ground yourself is really, really effective. So I can remember one time where she and I were having a verbal argument, and I had promised myself I would do something because it was very stressful, and we'd end up, one of us, saying a rude word to the other. And so this one time, I just lay down on the ground and I put my hand on my heart and I said, "Oh, honey, I just hate it when we talk like this." And the argument was over. But it really doesn't matter what you do, as long as you have some strategy that allows you to calm down. It's like putting on a brake, because the stress is sort of spinning you. Often with stress, if you have too much of it, the amygdala is firing, saying you're actually in emotional danger, where you may or you may not be. Of course, self-care strategies. And the main self-care strategy is not to beat yourself up about any emotion. It's like taking your own hand, putting on your adult wise self, taking the hand of the emotions that have started to feel out of control, as if you were taking the hand of a kid that's starting to either panic or get, stressed out or get fearful, and to calm yourself, have a few words that work for you. Some people read affirmation books, that calm them down and have affirmation lines. I think it's more effective to set up 3 to 5 counseling sessions and find the perfect and right affirmations for you based on your history. So I told you a little bit about my story about stupid. Like I easily hear in my head, I'm stupid, which then causes extra stress and I'm not managing myself well. I can burst into tears. So I have a little line to myself and I say, oh, Patsy, it's okay to make mistakes. You're safe now. So self-talk's good. Breathing, feeling your feet's good. Get yourself grounded. Few couples have arguments in bed. It's very difficult to feel out of control when more body parts are grounded. I recommend if you're going to have a stressful, crucial conversation with a loved one, start with sitting down. Even better, sit down and hold hands when you start the conversation.
Those are really great tips. Thank you so much for sharing all of those. I think those are going to be really helpful. As for resiliency, how can somebody increase their resilience skills?
I'd suggest they start with writing down what's not working for them. I mean, don't try to fix what's not broken. Also, write down what is working for you. And if you don't know your strengths, do take Martin Seligman's inventory. It's free online. You just Google Seligman, Seligman, via BIA, character strengths, and know your strengths. A lot of the resiliency work talks about strength-based. You've probably heard that strategy or that concept of we're going to build from strength-based concepts. So it's useful to know your own strengths and to be able to comment on other people's strengths. When it comes to trauma, one of the best things you can do, and it's not easy to do, is write down the 10 most distressful events you've ever had in your life, going back as far as you can as a child. And then get a friend, an emotionally safe friend, or again, a therapist to take a look at that list. One of the most useful tools that's available online, if you suspect that you have childhood trauma, is a free score. It's called Adverse Childhood Experiences Score, ACEs. And it lists, based on research, the 10 most frequent distressing, abusive events in childhood. And if you take that score, it's a good indicator for you whether you're living with childhood trauma, sometimes called complex trauma, sometimes called generational trauma. And so it's very difficult to just suggest that you can manage everyday stress if you're living with trauma. This is why our mental health tends to be rather complicated. It's very discouraging for people that invest in stress management books or going to stress management workshops, and they still find themselves perhaps exploding with anger or sinking into depression or having anxiety attacks. And they start to feel like a failure when it's really not their fault, which is why I love Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey's book, What Happened to You. It's a very good book as well to get a sense of, yes, there's not something wrong with me. It's not like what's wrong with me. It's what happened to me that has not been resolved that's the issue.
Oh, that's great. Patricia, this has been so amazing, so helpful. Thank you so much for today. Can
You're
you
welcome.
can you please share where everyone can find you?
My website is solutionsforresilience.com. It's all you really need to know, and everything else is linked to it, including my YouTube channel. So solutionsforresilience.com.
Perfect. And I will have that in the show notes. Everyone, go check out Patricia. Patricia, thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your stories and all of your expertise.
My pleasure.
Patricia, thank you so much for coming on and not only sharing your story, but your expertise as well. It's such an important topic, and I thank you for your work in spreading the message about the importance of resiliency and building up our resiliency. If you liked this episode, please share it and tag me on social media. You can find me at The Wellness Project with Des on Instagram. Make sure you're following me there. And I would love it if you could become a part of my Facebook community. I'm in there pretty much every day with mental health content. And make sure you sign up for my email list. When you sign up, not only will you hear from me every week about my latest podcast episodes, my latest blogs, my latest offerings, but you will also get your free weekly wellness checklist, which you can download and print over and over again each week to help track your wellness goals. And don't forget that every episode of The Wellness Project has an episode page full of all the links. You can find today's detailed show notes and links at accordingtodes.com/133. Thank you so much for being here today. I'll see you in 2 weeks with another amazing guest.